The wind outside roared like a beast, carrying with it sheets of snow that buried everything in sight. I was just settling into my favorite chair, savoring the warmth of the fire, when I heard it, faint scratches at the door. At first I ignored it, thinking it was just the wind playing tricks. But then came a sound that froze me in my tracks. A desperate whine. I opened the door to find a trembling German shepherd, his body covered in snow, barely clinging to life. What happened next would haunt me forever. Winter in the mountains is a force to be reckoned with. The snowstorm that night wasn't just any storm. It was one of those relentless, unforgiving tempests that made you grateful to be indoors. My cabin, tucked away in the woods, was my sanctuary. I had spent the evening doing what I always did on nights like this, stoking the fire and letting its warmth erase the chill from my bones. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and causing the shutters to creak. I was halfway through a book, the kind you read slowly just to savor, when I heard it, a soft, repetitive scratching. At first I dismissed it. Out here, noises were common. Branches swayed in the wind, animals roamed through the snow, and sometimes the cabin itself seemed to groan under the weight of the storm. But then the sound came again, more insistent this time. Scratch, scratch, whine. I set my book down, my heart thudding. Living alone in the wilderness, you learn to trust your instincts, and something about that sound wasn't right. I approached the door cautiously, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The scratching stopped as I got closer, replaced by a low, pitiful whimper. My pulse quickened. What could it be? A wounded animal. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter and opened the door a crack. The icy wind hit me instantly, carrying a flurry of snow into the cabin. Shining the beam onto the porch, my breath caught in my throat. A German shepherd stood there, his fur coated in frost, his body trembling violently. His ribs were visible beneath his matted fur, and his eyes, oh, his eyes, were filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, pulling the door open wider. The dog tried to step forward but stumbled, his legs buckling beneath him. Without thinking, I dropped the flashlight and reached out, scooping him into my arms. His body was ice cold, his fur damp and rough against my skin. "Hang on, buddy," I murmured, carrying him inside and kicking the door shut behind me. I laid him gently on the rug near the fireplace, my hands shaking as I grabbed a blanket to wrap around him. He didn't move, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. For a moment, I thought I was too late. "Come on, stay with me," I urged, my voice breaking. I rushed to the kitchen, filling a bowl with lukewarm water and grabbing an old towel. Kneeling beside him, I began to gently rub his fur, trying to melt the ice and bring warmth back to his frozen body. His ears twitched slightly, a small sign of life that filled me with hope. As I worked, questions swirled in my mind. Where had he come from? How long had he been out there in the storm? And why had he chosen my cabin, of all places? The storm outside raged on, but inside the fire crackled, and the room grew warmer. Slowly, the dog's trembling lessened. His eyes fluttered open for a brief moment, meeting mine before closing again. "You're safe now," I whispered, not sure if he could hear me. But as I sat there watching over him, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary encounter. This dog had come to me for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it was only the beginning. The fire crackled softly as I sat beside the German shepherd, watching his chest rise and fall in shallow but steady breaths. The room was quiet except for the storm raging outside, the wind howling like a restless spirit. I wrapped another blanket around him, trying to push away the nagging fear that he wouldn't make it through the night. Every few minutes I reached out to check if his body was warming up. Slowly his fur began to lose its icy stiffness, and the trembling subsided. I kept rubbing his paws gently, trying to restore circulation. His ears twitched faintly, and his tail gave the slightest of movements. These small signs of life felt like monumental victories. "Where did you come from, buddy?" I asked softly, more to myself than to him. His matted coat and emaciated frame suggested he had been on his own for a long time. Yet he had made it to my doorstep through a storm that could have easily claimed his life. It wasn't luck. It was sheer determination. The storm outside showed no sign of letting up. Snow piled against the windows, and the wind continued to batter the cabin. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. Living off the grid had its perks, peace, solitude, but it also meant I was on my own in situations like this. I moved to the kitchen and heated up some chicken broth, the simplest thing I could think of that might coax him into eating. When I returned, his eyes had opened slightly. They were a deep, soulful brown, and they locked onto mine as I knelt beside him. "Hey," I said softly, placing the bowl near his nose. "I made this for you. Can you try a little?" He sniffed the bowl weakly, his nose twitching. After a moment he stretched his neck forward and lapped at the liquid. My chest tightened with relief. "Good boy," I whispered, stroking his head gently. The simple act of eating seemed to give him a little strength. He tried to shift his position, pushing himself up slightly, before collapsing back onto the blanket. "Easy," I said, helping him settle back down. "You've been through a lot. Take it slow." As the hours passed, he seemed to grow more stable. His breathing deepened, and his eyes stayed open longer, following me as I moved around the room. I could tell he was still wary, unsure of where he was or whether he was truly safe. Then, just as dawn began to break, a sound made me freeze. Scratch, scratch. I turned to the door, my pulse quickening. Another dog, or something else? The German shepherd by the fire stirred, his ears perking up. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the door and opened it cautiously. What I saw made my stomach drop. A second German shepherd, smaller and younger, stood shivering in the snow. Its fur was just as matted and frosted as the one already inside. "Oh my God," I muttered, crouching down. The younger dog took a step forward, its paws trembling from the cold. It didn't bark, growl, or shy away. Instead, it gave me the same look of desperation I had seen the night before, a silent plea for help. Two dogs, both in dire condition, both appearing at my doorstep in the middle of a brutal snowstorm. This was no coincidence, and whatever had brought them here, it wasn't over yet. The snow crunched loudly under my boots as I pushed deeper into the trees. Every sound felt magnified in the stillness, the creak of branches overhead, the occasional rush of snow falling from a high bough. My nerves were on edge, but I kept going, following the trail. The human footprints were erratic, weaving in and out of the dog's tracks, as if whoever it was had been wandering aimlessly. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The prints didn't lead to a clear destination. They zigzagged, looped back, and sometimes stopped altogether before continuing. After about 20 minutes, I reached a small clearing. The tracks stopped abruptly, the snow disturbed as if there had been a struggle. My heart raced as I scanned the area, taking in every detail. There were scuff marks in the snow, paw prints circling tightly around a deep depression where the human footprints ended. "What happened here?" I muttered aloud. I crouched down, running my gloved hand over the disturbed snow. It was packed tightly, as if someone had fallen or been forced down. A shiver ran through me. The scene was unsettling, like the aftermath of a fight. But there was no blood, no signs of injury. As I stood, I noticed something half buried in the snow a few feet away. I reached for it, brushing off the icy covering, and froze. It was a leash, frayed at the edges, as if it had been chewed through. My mind raced with questions. Had the dogs been tied up here? Had they broken free? I looked around again, my eyes scanning the tree line. The forest seemed to close in on me, its silence oppressive. Whoever had been here was long gone, but the leash told me one thing for certain: the dogs hadn't come to my cabin by accident. The sudden snap of a branch behind me made me spin around, my heart leaping into my throat. For a moment I saw nothing but the endless stretch of trees. Then, from the shadows, I caught a glimpse of movement. "Hello?" I called, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. The figure that emerged from the trees wasn't human. It was the older German shepherd. His golden brown fur stood in stark contrast against the snow. His tail wagged slightly as he approached, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You followed me," I said, relief washing over me. He stopped a few feet away, his ears twitching as if listening for something. Then he barked, a sharp, urgent sound that echoed through the clearing. "What is it, boy?" I asked, taking a step toward him. He barked again, turning his head toward the deeper part of the forest. It was as if he was trying to tell me something, urging me to follow. My hesitation lasted only a moment before I fell in step behind him, my fear replaced by a growing sense of purpose. Whatever had brought these dogs into my life wasn't over. And as I followed the shepherd into the woods, I knew I was about to uncover a truth I wasn't prepared for. The German shepherd moved with purpose, his paws crunching the snow as he led me deeper into the woods. Every few steps he would glance back at me, his eyes filled with urgency that made my stomach churn. Whatever he was leading me toward, it was important, and likely not something I was ready to face. The forest grew denser, the trees forming a canopy that blocked out what little sunlight had broken through the clouds. The air felt colder here, heavier, and the silence was oppressive. My breath came out in visible puffs as I struggled to keep up with the dog, who seemed tireless despite the ordeal he'd endured. "Where are you taking me, boy?" I muttered under my breath, my voice barely louder than a whisper. He didn't respond, of course, but his pace quickened. We weaved through the trees, following no visible path, until we came to a small clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated shed, its roof sagging under the weight of the snow. The sight of it sent a chill down my spine. The shepherd stopped a few feet away from the shed and barked, his tail wagging slightly. He looked at me expectantly, urging me to go closer. I hesitated, my mind racing with possibilities. Why had he brought me here? Was someone inside? Had this been where the dogs were kept before they escaped? Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, the snow crunching loudly under my boots. The closer I got to the shed, the stronger the feeling of unease became. The wood was weathered and rotting, the windows covered with grime. I placed my hand on the door handle, the cold metal biting into my skin, and pushed it open. The door creaked loudly, the sound echoing in the stillness of the forest. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the smell of damp wood and something else, something metallic. My eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls, and what I saw made my heart stop. There were cages, 4 of them lined up against the far wall. They were empty now, but the remnants of what had been there were unmistakable. Matted fur, chewed-up blankets, and broken bowls scattered across the floor. This wasn't just a shed. It had been a prison. I turned to the shepherd who was standing just inside the doorway, his tail low and his ears flat against his head. He let out a low whine, and my chest tightened. This was where he and the younger dog had come from. I moved closer to the cages, my hands trembling as I inspected them. The metal bars were bent in places, the locks rusted and broken. It was clear the dogs had escaped, but not without a struggle. My mind filled with images of what they must have endured here. Cold nights, no food, and the fear of whoever had put them in this place. Who had done this? And why? As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A small notebook lay on a makeshift table near the wall. I picked it up, the leather cover cracked and stiff with age. Flipping it open, I scanned the pages, my stomach twisting with every line I read. It was a logbook, dates, descriptions, and details about the dogs that had been kept here. Most of the entries were brief, but one stood out. A description of the older shepherd, subject number 12, male German shepherd, strong, obedient, potential for resale high. Resale. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. These dogs weren't just abandoned. They had been part of something far worse. A sudden sound made me freeze, a branch snapping outside. I turned toward the door, my heart pounding. Through the trees, I saw movement. A shadowy figure was watching us. The German shepherd let out a low growl. Whoever they were, they hadn't come to help, and they weren't going to let me leave without a fight.